All right, how's everybody doing today? Hotep, hey, this is Michael Imhotep, founder of the African History Network, host of the African History Network show. I'm a talk show host, researcher, lecturer, writer, and historian. So I want to give you an update on the lack of progress in trying to pass a budget to avoid a government shutdown, which would take place Saturday at midnight, Saturday, 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Saturday, September 29th, 2023. So I was on Roland Martin Unfiltered this evening, and we discussed this. So I wanted to give you some more information about this as well. You know, we talked about this last week. All right, so here's what happened today. Let's look at the Washington Post for this reporting. House of Representatives fails to pass short-term funding bill as shutdown looms. Now, the Republican-led House of Representatives failed on Friday, September 29th, 2023, to approve a 30-day stopgap funding bill as a government shutdown looms. Now, all the Democrats in the House of Representatives, as well as 21 Republicans, these Republicans with the House Freedom Caucus, voted against the measure, which would have cut most domestic programs by 30%. So you have Republicans who are trying to get drastic cuts to the federal budget, the budget that the White House submitted to Congress to approve. The U.S. House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate has to approve the budget. There are 12 subcommittees in the House, 12 appropriation subcommittees in the House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate that approves different portions of the budget. Now, it remains unclear what exactly will come next. House Speaker Kevin, one GOP aide told the Washington Post, quote, "I don't know who's going to vote for what anymore." Now, we know that House Speaker Kevin McCarthy is probably the weakest House Speaker in history. It took him 15 rounds of voting to become Speaker of the House of Representatives, and he cut these crazy deals with Republicans, especially the House Freedom Caucus, to become Speaker of the House of Representatives. Now, House Speaker Kevin McCarthy said on Friday, September 29th, that he would, Friday evening, September 29th, that he would support a clean stopgap funding bill that would not include aid to Ukraine, nor the tough border security legislation that House Republicans demanded. Such a bill will probably face stiff opposition. Now, the government was shut down at 12:01 a.m. on Sunday morning, October 1st, if lawmakers do not act. Okay, now you can have more than 800,000 federal civilian employees who will be furloughed. They will be sent home without pay during the shutdown. You can have about another 3 million more that will continue to work without pay until the government shutdown is over. Okay, so if we look here, I posted this on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network. This comes from the Readout with Joanne Reed. This is from Thursday, September 28th, 2023. GOP plan slashes social safety net. GOP plan slashes social safety net. So here you have Republicans who want to do massive cuts to the federal budget, to the budget that the White House submitted to Congress. And it's going to do harm to millions of Americans, especially to African Americans. So it will, the budget cuts that Republicans want to implement will 1 million low-income mothers and young kids could be forced onto a wait list for nutrition aid, okay, like SNAP benefits, supplemental nutrition program. 70%, it would be a 70% cut to home heating assistance ahead of winter months. It would be an 80% cut in funding for public schools with high concentrations of students in poverty, an 80% cut in funding for public schools with high concentrations of students in poverty. Okay. Now, that's going to hurt a lot of African Americans in African Americans in those communities. Okay. So even if you have situations where you have some African Americans who may be middle class, but they may live in areas that have a higher poverty rate. Okay, that's going to disproportionately hurt African Americans. 33% cut to housing subsidies. 33% cut to housing subsidies. And then also 60,000 seniors would lose Meals on Wheels. Okay, 60,000 seniors will lose Meals on Wheels, and that's going to disproportionately hurt African Americans as well. So you have Republicans who are holding American citizens hostage to try to push forth these very severe budget cuts. Okay, now if we go back to the piece from the Washington Post, and this is their live updates. Let's see. Okay, House Republicans met for a little over 2 hours on Friday, September 29th, Friday afternoon. Various options for a short-term continuing resolution, or CR, were proposed. Okay, were proposed, but no immediate results were announced. Quote, all we just heard is total capitulation, said a Representative Bob Good, Republican for Virginia. He said before clarifying that he believes Speaker Kevin McCarthy has surrendered to the U.S. Senate's demands and proposals. All right, now there is a portion of this that I want to look at here from the Washington Post, and this deals with more than 800,000 federal civilian employees would be furloughed. Okay, they would be sent home without pay. And I want to scroll down to that here. Okay, so just give me a minute because I'm going through these updates here. Right here. Okay. More than 800,000 federal civilian employees would be sent home without pay during a shutdown. Now, the Biden-Harris administration would furlough 820,000 federal employees across the government if Congress cannot reach a spending deal by Sunday, according to estimates from the Office of Management and Budget, meaning they would be sent home without pay and forbidden to work, right? Sent home without pay and forbidden to work. Another 680,000 civil servants would be required to report to work, but not be paid. Okay, another 680,000 civil servants would be required to report to work, but not be paid. Okay, until after the shutdown is over with. Along with 2 million military service members, the budget office said. Okay, the Office of Management and Budget. All of these groups would be paid once Congress passes a budget. Now, the last shutdown lasted 35 days. That was from December 2018 through January 2019. And as I said last week, and as I said on Roland Martin Unfiltered, there were 3 government shutdowns in the first 2 years of the Trump administration. These people are totally incompetent, and you have to keep stupid people out of power. You have to vote and keep stupid people out of power. This is too much power for crazy people to have. Now, the estimates could shift slightly, but they cover the bulk of the federal government, officials said. The number of furloughed employees would come to almost 3 times the number during the 5-week shutdown during the Trump administration in the late 2018, early 2019. So furloughed means sent home without pay. Okay, the number of furloughed employees would come to almost 3 times the number during the 5-week shutdown during the Trump administration, December 2018 through January 2019. Then at that point, 300,000 employees were sent home without pay, the Congressional Budget Office estimated. The discrepancy comes largely from the nature of the shutdown. The discrepancy comes largely from the nature of the shutdown. 5 years ago, Congress had appropriated spending bills for some operations, including at the Department of Defense, which is the largest agency. That's not the case today. Okay, that's not the case today. Okay, so check out these updates from the Washington Post. Then there's a piece from NBC News that I was looking at before we went on the air on Roland Martin Unfiltered today. Okay, now this is Shalonda Young from the Office of Management and Budget. On September 29th, she said that House Republicans were on an island and could force a shutdown, Now, we know that 18% of the federal workforce is made up of African Americans, okay? And this is something I was warning people about. This government shutdown will disproportionately negatively harm African Americans, okay, who make up 18% of federal employees. If we look at the article from NBC News today, this one here deals with the failed vote. And I want to go to this here. This one is Congress races against time to avert a shutdown in 3 days, facing bleak prospects. This is from NBC News. Hold on, that's not the one I want. The one I want, this is the one I want. Conservative rebels tank McCarthy's funding bill. Conservative rebels tank McCarthy's funding bill, raising odds of a shutdown. Okay, so this is from Friday, September 29th, 2023. NBCnews.com. So a band of conservative rebels on Friday, September 29th, revolted and blocked House Republicans' short-term funding bill. Revolted and blocked House Republicans' short-term funding bill to keep the government open. Now, let's see here. Okay, a band of conservative rebels on Friday revolted and blocked House Republicans' short-term funding bill to keep the government open, delivering a political blow to Speaker of the House Kevin McCarthy and likely cementing the chances of a painful government shutdown that's just hours away. Now, 21 rebels led by Sugar Daddy Matt Gaetz out of Florida, who is a Trump acolyte and a conservative bomb thrower, top Trump ally. They voted Friday afternoon to tank the 30-day funding bill, leaving Republicans without a game plan to avert a shutdown. The vote was 198 to 232. Now, the hardliners say they are unconcerned if the government shuts down. These 21 rebels, many of them are coup plotters or coup plotter sympathizers. They don't care if the government shuts down. They don't care if people get hurt. They don't care if people go without a paycheck or are hungry. They just care about doing the bidding for Donald Trump. And as we talked about last Friday, a lot of this has to do with them mistakenly believing that if the government shuts down, the prosecution of Donald Trump will stop. That's not the case. We'll talk about that here in just a minute. The hardliners say they are unconcerned if the government shuts down, as it appears likely to do so at 12:01 a.m. Sunday morning, October 1st. Okay, because we know the fiscal year begins October 1st. They want to they want the House to pass all 12 appropriations bills with steep spending cuts, then negotiate funding with the Democratic controlled Senate. Okay. Now, as we talked about before, when we looked at the U.S. Constitution, the Article 1, Section 9, Clause 7 of the U.S. Constitution, the ability to tax and spend belongs to Congress. Okay, belongs to the House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate. This is called power of the purse. If we look at this from history.house.gov, history.house.gov is the history section of the House of Representatives website. House.gov is the official website of the U.S. House of Representatives. Article 1, Section 9, Clause 7 of the U.S. Constitution. This is known as power of the purse. No money shall be drawn from the Treasury, but in consequence of appropriations made by law, and a regular statement and account of the receipts and expenditures of all public money shall be published from time to time. Okay. So Congress, and in particular, the House of Representatives, is invested with the power of the purse, invested with, quote, the power of the purse, the ability to tax and spend public money for the national government. Massachusetts Elbridge Gerry said at the Federal Constitutional Convention that the House of Representatives, quote, was more immediately the representatives of the people, and it was a maxim that the people ought to hold the purse strings. The people ought to hold the purse strings. So read the rest of this here, power of the purse, from history.house.gov. Okay. And this is why it's important to understand the U.S. Constitution, because all this is in the U.S. Constitution. This is where this comes from. Okay. Now, there was a flow chart that I showed you last week that dealt with the fiscal budget. Okay. And this comes from the Washington Post. Deals with the federal budget. So this deals with the budget process. Okay, the federal budget process. And we know that the White House submits the budget to Congress, and Congress approves the president's budget. So over the years, I heard people say, well, I'm going to vote for president, but I'm not going to vote for the House of Representatives, the U.S. Senate, which is really ridiculous. That makes absolutely no sense. It means you don't understand the Constitution. And stupid things like this happen. Keep in mind the difference between Kevin McCarthy being Speaker of the House of Representatives and Hakeem Jeffries being Speaker of the House of Representatives was about 7,000 votes in a handful of House districts. About 7,000 votes in a handful of House districts made the difference between Republicans being in control of the House of Representatives and Democrats being in control of the House of Representatives. As Democrats were in control of the House, a budget would have already been passed. We wouldn't be looking at a government shutdown. We wouldn't be looking at massive budget cuts, things of this nature. Okay. Now, this comes from the Washington Post. A guide to the federal budget process, And unfortunately, in America, we have a big lack of civics. We're suffering from a lack of information, a lack of civics, and most Americans don't understand the U.S. Constitution. The president's budget request is the first step in the complex process of funding the federal government. Okay. Discretionary spending is subject to annual approval by Congress. Legislators have less control over mandatory spending, which is devoted to entitlement programs. So if we look at this flow chart here, first on or before the first Monday in February, the president submits to Congress a detailed budget request for the next fiscal year, which begins on October 1st. Okay, so this is why if they don't pass a budget, the government is going to shut down. The government will run out of money. The government will run out of money September 30th, 11:59 p.m. because the new budget starts on October 1st. Step 2, based on the president's proposal, the House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate budget committees, their budget committees propose budget resolutions, that set targets for spending and tax revenue and identify any policies that will need to move through reconciliation. These are sent to a floor vote and differences are resolved in conference. So you have a conference committee, they vote on different portions of the budget in both the House and the Senate, okay? Then step 3, the House and Senate appropriations committees divide the discretionary spending set forth in the budget resolution among each of their 12 subcommittees, among each of their 12 subcommittees. So you have the House and Senate appropriations subcommittees, okay, that vote on different portions of the federal budget, which is usually between $6 and $7 trillion, the annual federal budget. All right. This is why elections have consequences. Now, because Republicans control the House of Representatives, they control all 12 of the subcommittees. Okay. They control all the committees. They have a majority in all the committees, basically in the House of Representatives. They control all 12 of the House appropriations subcommittees that will vote on different portions of the federal budget. All right, so read the rest of this here. This is at WashingtonPost.com, a guide to the federal budget process. So we need, like, I'm a bill on Capitol Hill, Schoolhouse Rock. We need that on steroids because so many people don't understand this. And they're like, well, I'm just going to vote for president. I'm not going to vote for the House of Representatives. I'm not going to vote for the U.S. Senate. And Congress is a co-equal branch of the federal government. Okay, Congress is a co-equal, the 3 branches of the federal government: the executive branch, the judicial branch, which is the federal courts, Federal Court of Appeals, U.S. Supreme Court, and then you have U.S. House of Representatives and U.S. Senate. Okay, if we go back to the article here from NBCnews.com, the hardliners say they are unconcerned if the government shuts down. They just don't give a damn. They want the House to pass all 12 appropriations bills with steep spending cuts, then negotiate funding with the Democratic-controlled Senate. Moderate Republicans lashed out with fury at the conservatives who voted down the funding bill with specific criticism reserved for Sugar Daddy Matt Gaetz, whom they accused of fomenting chaos to oust McCarthy. So there's an article from the Washington Post that Matt Gaetz wants to call a vote to vacate and push McCarthy out of his speakership. Representative Mike Lawler, Republican from North Carolina, who's a more moderate Republican, he said, unfortunately, a handful of people, and in particular, a party of one, Matt Gaetz, has chosen to put his own agenda, his own personal agenda, above all else. And Representative Mike Lawler, Republican from New York, is facing a tough reelection bid in 2024. He said after they took the vote today. Okay, now, Matt Gaetz said there's only one person to blame for any potential government shutdown. He's not a conservative Republican. He's a charlatan. I'm sorry. This is Representative Mike Lawler saying this about Matt Gaetz. There's only one person to blame for any personal government shutdown, and that is Matt Gaetz. Representative Mike Lawler said he's not a conservative Republican. He's a charlatan. Gaetz later tweeted at Representative Mike Lawler, quote, 20 other Republicans voted with me, and be best, Mike. Okay, that just means they are as stupid as you are, Matt Gaetz. Okay, so read this article here from NBCnews.com. It goes on to talk about another staunch opponent of the stopgap bill is Representative Matt Rosendale, Republican from Montana, and Representative Ken Buck, Republican from Colorado, said he'd only vote for it if it cuts spending sharply, down to fiscal 2019 levels. Given how small the GOP majority is, McCarthy can only lose 4 votes on legislation. Okay, so check out the rest of this piece here from NBC News. Now, if we look at the damage that this would do, I posted this also on my Facebook page, Michael Imhotep, IMHOTEP. And let's go to this here. This was from, I think this was from the Readout with Joanne Reed also. Where is that? This one right here. Okay, what could happen in a government shutdown? What could happen in a government shutdown? Federal employees pay for the 4 million federal employees stops, and roughly 850,000 employees could be furloughed, sent home, and not able to work and not get paid. Okay, 850,000 would be furloughed, around that. The rest of the 4 million would report to work but not get paid until the shutdown is over with. Okay, and this happened in December 2018, January 2019. And there were stories of federal employees having to go to food banks to buy to get food because they couldn't afford to buy food. They're selling blood to buy gasoline so they could go back and forth to work. All types of horror stories like this. Social Security and Medicare. Checks are sent out, but benefit verification and card issuance would stop. Okay, so people who are trying to qualify for Medicare and Social Security, that's going to be delayed. SNAP benefits. Agriculture Department may only be able to send out assistance for 30 days after the start of the shutdown. National parks. Over 400 parks across the country will be forced to turn away visitors. Air travel. Now, this caused a huge problem in December 2018, January 2019, because there was a shortage of TSA agents. There was this called long lines at the airport trying to go through security. Air traffic controllers and TSA agents are ordered to work without pay. So you had a number of TSA agents called off work. I think the number was something like 10%, because they still have to be able to get to work. They still have to be able to put gas in their car, things like this, but they don't have a paycheck coming in. Okay, so this causes hardship for these employees and their families. Okay, because of stupid people like Matt Gaetz. Now, as I said before, 18% of the federal workforce is made up of African Americans. Okay, and if we look at what happened in 2018, so there was a good article that I cited back then and recently. This is from NPR.com, National Public Radio, called Barely Treading Water. Barely Treading Water. Why the shutdown disproportionately affects Black Americans. Okay. This is from January 14th, 2019 by Ari Shapiro. And in this article, it says, as the government shutdown enters its fourth week. Now, once again, this is from January 2019 under Donald Trump, becoming the longest in United States history. Federal workers around the country are struggling to make ends meet. Federal workers around the country are struggling to make ends meet. But according to Jamil Larty, a reporter with the Guardian.com out of the United Kingdom, the shutdown is having a disproportionate effect on Black workers. The shutdown is having a disproportionate effect on Black workers. African Americans make up a higher percentage of federal workers than they do of the non-government workforce. That's in part because for generations, government was provided, for generations, government has provided good wages and job security for African Americans who faced more overt discrimination in the private sector because they face racism. And racism is a system of advantage and privilege distributed based upon race, which comes out of the ideology of European white supremacy for the purpose of preserving genetic white survival. Now, Ari Shapiro of National Public Radio's All Things Considered sat down with Jamil Larty to talk about some of the ways this disparity is playing out right now. Okay, and Ari Shapiro asked Jamil Larty, could you explain the history that led to our situation today where African Americans make up a higher percentage of the federal workforce than they do in the private sector? African Americans make up a higher percentage of the federal workforce than they do in the private sector. Okay. Now, Jamil Larty said the federal government obviously has its own untoward history of racial discrimination, from the underwriting redlining system created by 1937 by the federal government, and federal mortgage programming, and excluding African Americans from New Deal programming. Okay, from New Deal program, you know, a lot of African Americans were excluded, even though it helped some. The New Deal under President Franklin Roosevelt during the Great Depression, which starts with the stock market crash of October 1929, going into the 1930s, the New Deal program, and then even going into the World War II era. But it has also been the institutional vanguard of the nation's slow march toward equality, more so than the private sector at large, and more than most state and local governments. In 1941, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt signed Executive Order 8802, which banned race discrimination in the Defense Department. This dealt with the jobs in the Department of Defense. And that was because he signed Executive Order 8802 because A. Philip Randolph threatened to put 100,000 African Americans to march on Washington to embarrass Roosevelt if he did not desegregate jobs in the Department of Defense. And so this was going to be the original March on Washington before August 28th, 1963. There was going to be a March on Washington decades before that. The day before the march was scheduled, President Roosevelt relinquished and agreed to sign the executive order. So he signed the executive order the day before the march was going to take place. So A. Philip Randolph, president of the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, called off the march the next day. That was scheduled for the next day. Okay, now, in 1941, President Roosevelt signed Executive Order 8802, and that's largely seen as the most important move in support of the civil rights of Black Americans from Reconstruction all the way until 1964, when you have the Civil Rights Act of 1964. The federal government, for fairly obvious reasons, just did a better job of abiding by the Civil Rights Act than the labor market at large. Now, Ari Shapiro asked Jamil Larty, We know that Black families have a fraction of the wealth of white families. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, for every $100 in white family wealth, Black families have just over $5. So what does that mean when Black government workers start missing a paycheck? What does that mean when Black government workers start missing a paycheck? Jamil Lardy said the profound racial wealth gap in the U.S. makes it far more difficult for the average Black American to sustain a long period without a paycheck as compared to white Americans. So this government shutdown coming from Republicans who overwhelmingly vote against every bill that is beneficial to African Americans, whether it's the American Rescue Plan. No Republicans in the House or the Senate voted for the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan, even though the $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill was bipartisan. Only 19 Republicans out of 50 in the Senate voted for the bill, and only 14 Republicans out of over 200 in the House of Representatives voted for the bill. The Republicans overwhelmingly voted against the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. No, that vote was 220 to 212 in the House of Representatives. No Republicans voted for that bill. No Republicans voted for the Domestic Terrorism Prevention Act. Well, I'm sorry, only one Republican did, Adam Kinzinger of Illinois, and he didn't run for re-election. He was on the January 6th committee. No Republicans in the U.S. Senate voted for the Domestic Terrorism Prevention Act. Most Republicans didn't vote for the Crown Act in the House of Representatives. The John Lewis Voting Rights Act, no Republicans in the House of Representatives or the U.S. Senate voted for the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. You can just go to congress.gov, and you can, all these bills, you can look and see how each member of the House of Representatives and U.S. Senate voted for these bills. Overwhelmingly, Republicans consistently vote against these policies that are beneficial to African Americans. And then they're forcing a government shutdown at the same time to force severe budget cuts that would disproportionately hurt African Americans. The profound racial wealth gap in the U.S. is far more difficult for the average Black American to sustain a long period without a paycheck as compared to white Americans. We should note that the disparity in wealth is probably much less acute among federal workers. We should note that that disparity in wealth is probably much less acute or much less prevalent among federal workers. We don't have numbers of Black federal workers' wealth versus white federal workers' wealth. It's probably much closer than the broader disparity. But overall, African Americans are less likely to have friends, family, networks, and access to credit, you name it. Things that will help you survive a period without a paycheck, they're less likely to have it. So Ari Shapiro asked the question, tell us about one of the workers you spoke with for this story. The story that Jamil Lardy wrote for the Guardian.com, okay? And he talked about an employee named Laura from the National Park Service, okay? So check out the rest of this piece here. And this deals with, this is from January 2019, during the last government shutdown, barely treading water, while the shutdown disproportionately affects Black Americans. Now, if we look at, there was this one right here from, let me see, there's another one from the Washington Post that I wanted to look at because I just pulled it up here. Is this the right one? It's Kevin McCarthy embarks stark cuts to safety net to win hard right. Yeah, this is it right here. This talks about the severe budget cuts that some Republicans want. Some of the MAGA Republicans want. Kevin McCarthy embraces stark cuts to safety net to win hard right. Republican House Speaker embraces major spending reductions in trying to win conservative support for a funding bill. And one of the things they talk about in here is because I saw this article mentioned on, I think this was on the Readout with Joanne Reed. And in here, it says reducing federal spending on home heating. Let me find this here. Okay, cutting housing subsidies for the poor by 33% as soaring rents drive a national affordability crisis, forcing more than 1 million women and children onto the wait list of a nutritional assistance program for poor mothers with young children, reducing federal spending on home heating assistance for low-income families by more than 70%, with energy prices high heading into the winter months. Now, this is also going to hurt a lot of poor white people. Some of these poor white people voted to put these Republicans in power in the House of Representatives in the first place. Okay, this is the type of nonsense coming from Republicans. Now, I'm neither Republican nor Democrat, but I sure as hell ain't stupid. I can see who overwhelmingly at the federal level keeps voting against our own interests and voting for bills that are harmful to us. I'm neither Republican nor Democrat. I'm definitely not stupid. Okay, so check out that article. Then there was one from, let's see, this one here from NPR goes through, we talked about this some last week. This goes through and really explains what a government shutdown is, what happens during a government shutdown. This is from, I'm sorry, PBS NewsHour. PBS NewsHour, PBS.org, PBS NewsHour. The government is headed for a shutdown. Who's affected and what happens next? This is from September 23rd, 2023. The federal government is headed toward a shutdown that will disrupt many services, squeeze workers, and royal politics as Republicans in the House, fueled by hard right demands for deep cuts, force a confrontation over federal spending. Force a confrontation over federal spending. So if we look at this quickly here, they ask, what is a government shutdown? They go through explain each one of these. They go through explain these different steps and this different terminology. So what is a government shutdown? A shutdown happens when Congress fails to pass some type of funding legislation that is signed into law by the president. So it has to pass the House, pass the Senate, and sign into law by the president. Lawmakers are supposed to pass 12 different spending bills to fund agencies across the government. Okay. And that's the 12 different appropriations subcommittees that I showed you in that flow chart. Lawmakers are supposed to pass 12 different spending bills to fund agencies across the government, but the process is time consuming. They often resort to passing a temporary extension called a continuing resolution, or CR, to allow the government to keep operating. When no funding legislation is enacted, federal agencies have to stop all non-essential work. Federal agencies have to stop all non-essential work and will not send paychecks as long as the shutdown lasts. Okay, so you have family members, you have African Americans who are federal employees who are helping out family members, helping out their children. They have financial commitments, things like that. All that could go up in smoke. All the employees deemed essential, such as air traffic controllers and law enforcement officers, still have to report to work. Other federal employees are furloughed. Which means they are sent home without pay and they can't work. Okay. Under a 2019 law, those same workers are slated to receive back pay once the funding impasse is resolved. All right. Now, Donald Trump put out a tweet because he is under the misconception that if the government is shut down, then the federal prosecution against him will stop. Okay, that is false. The federal prosecution is going to continue. All right. There was and they talk about that here in the piece from pbs.org. What about court cases, the work of Congress, and presidential pay? Okay. Let's see if we look at this here. Okay, so when would a shutdown begin and how long? Government funding expires October 1st. Okay, we talked about that. A shutdown will effectively begin at 12:01 a.m. On October 1st if Congress is not able to pass a funding plan that the president signs into law. Okay, who does a shutdown affect? All right, so they talk about military personnel, employees. 60% of federal workers are stationed in defense, veteran affairs, and homeland security. Federal workers are stationed in all 50 states and have direct interaction with taxpayers, from TSA agents who operate security at airports to postal service workers who deliver mail. Some federal offices will also have to close or face shortened hours due to a shutdown. The Postal Service is funded differently, so mail will still be delivered. What about court cases, the work of Congress, and presidential pay? The president and members of Congress will continue to work and get paid. However, any members of their staff who are not deemed essential will be furloughed. Any members of their staff who are not deemed essential will be furloughed. The judiciary will be able to continue to operate for a limited time using funds derived from court filings and other fees, as well as other approved funding. Notably, funding for 3 special counsels appointed by Attorney General Merrick Garland would not be affected by a government shutdown because they are paid for through a permanent indefinite appropriation, an area that's been exempted from shutdowns in the past. So Donald Trump wants his MAGA Republicans to shut down the government because he thinks it's going to stop his 2 federal indictments. No, it won't. That means the 2 federal cases against Donald Trump, the former president, as well as the case against Hunter Biden, the son of Joe Biden, would not be interrupted. Trump has demanded that Republicans defund the prosecutions against him as a condition of funding the government, declaring it their, quote, last chance, end quote, to act. I thought the Republicans were supposed to be for law and order. I thought they were the party of law and order. What happened was they backed the blue until the coup. That's what happened. If we look here, there was a post that I did with Donald Trump's post from Fake Social, his knockoff Twitter social media platform. I want to see if I can find it here because I did a post about it. So that was probably last Friday. Yeah, this is right here. This one right here. Let's look at this. How's everybody doing? Give us a thumbs up, give us a heart, give us a like on this broadcast. Also, you can support the African History Network, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN Show. Okay, I posted Donald Trump wants to shut down the government because he thinks it will stop his federal prosecution. It won't stop them. It will not stop the federal prosecution. And he said that a very important deadline is approaching at the end of the month, end of September. Republicans in Congress can and must defund all aspects of crooked Joe Biden's weaponized government that refuses to close the border and treat half the country as enemies of the state. Okay, this is just nonsense from him. Trump is scared of going to prison. Trump is scared to death of going to prison. He goes on to say, this is also the last chance to defund these political prosecutions against me and other patriots. They failed on the debt limit, but they must not fail now. Use the power of the purse and defend the country. Okay. He's trying to stay out of prison. That's what this is. Donald Trump is scared to death, and he's trying to stay out of prison. All right. So read the rest of that piece from PBS.org, Public Broadcasting System. And let's see, I think also there's a good article from thegrio.com that deals with experts. Let's see, what's the name of this? Close out this ad. Experts state that the shutdown has deeply affected Black families. Okay, this is from January 16th, 2019. January 16th, 2019. And I want to try to close out this video. I hate these pop-ups from the Grio. Experts state that the shutdown has deeply affected Black families. They cite this piece from businessinsider.com. And they also quote Ari Shapiro and Jamel Lardy in that article from National Public Radio as well. Okay. All right. So you can check out this piece also. So we have to learn from this. As I said on Roland Martin Unfiltered, this is about self-preservation. Okay. This is not about voting for somebody because they're a Democrat or Republican. This is about understanding policy and whose policies are most beneficial for African Americans. It's about voting people out of office who consistently vote against our own interests. Okay, keeping people in office who overwhelmingly vote for our interests. We have to understand and master political self-defense. So that's what this is about. Okay, we have to understand and master political self-defense, understand that politics is the legal distribution of scarce wealth, power, and resources, in the writing of laws, statutes, ordinances, amendments, and treaties, their adoption, interpretation, and enforcement. Politics impacts every aspect of our lives, from the water we drink to the air we breathe to the food we eat. And understand how to use politics as a tool to accomplish what it is that we want. Okay. How do we use it as a tool to accomplish what it is that we want? And we have to stop telling African Americans to exercise your right to vote. Okay. If you don't vote for exercise, you vote for power. If you want to exercise, you go to the gym and work out. Okay. Like I'm about to work out. You don't vote for exercise. You vote for power. You vote for policies that are beneficial to you, beneficial to your family, beneficial to your community, and policies that are beneficial to African Americans are good for America in general. We have to vote people into office whose policy platforms best line up with our interests. We have to vote people out of office who keep voting against our best interests. Okay. We have to understand political self-defense. All right. If you like this type of information, you support the African History Network, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, $ the AHN Show through Cash App. Also through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN Show, or go to our website, theafricanhistorynetwork.com, theafricanhistorynetwork.com, because you have the information right on the homepage of the website. And you can register for the online history classes that I teach on Saturdays and Sundays. So when you scroll down the website, you see information about our radio show, Sundays, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But Saturdays, I teach ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Kemet's one of the original names for Egypt. We deal with thousands of years of history, what leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. I do a PowerPoint presentation. We have book references, articles, video clips. So we have a class coming up this Saturday. We do the sessions live. All the sessions are archived and recorded. You can go back and watch it anytime. So even after the 12-week online course is over with, you'll still have full access. Okay, classes on sale $60, regularly $130. Sundays, I teach Black resistance movements from the Haitian Revolution, U.S. Civil War, Civil Rights Movement, and Black Power Movement, 1800 to 1968. Okay, so check that out as well. Content is PG-13, so you can use this with your children as well. And I do a PowerPoint presentation with book references, articles, video clips. I put together the curriculum for both classes. I'm a historian. I've been studying history 31 years. First class I've been teaching since 2017. Second class I started teaching in 2019. All right, look, we have to get out of here. Remember, at the African History Network, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right now it's correct wrong behavior. It's not over till we win Wakanda forever. Talk to you next time. Peace.